Um,
Did we catch that? I
oh,
don't know.
we are live. I was like, I hope I hit play or hit live right after that.
Hope I made that comment before we went live.
We will have to check it out. But hey, everyone.
Okay.
Happy Wednesday.
Hello.
So today I'm really excited about the conversation today. I have a very special guest, Hannah Smolinski. Or did I just mispronounce that?
It's okay. Smolinski.
Smolinski. I'm sorry. It's like, when you memorize something in your head and then I look at it, I was like, clearly there's an N.
Totally. I did that recently with a friend. I've known her for 2 years and I never said her last name out loud.
Yes.
And then I was like, I've been saying your last name incorrectly in my head for a long time.
For a long time. That's exactly what just happened because I have known you for years. So yes, I am very excited. And Hannah is a small business CFO. Is that how you would describe yourself?
Yes.
I
Yeah.
think of you as like a virtual CFO, like if small businesses can hire you to be a legit CFO for them.
Yes.
I love
that.
that.
Is correct.
So you know all the things business finances, and that's what we're going to talk about today, how to keep your business healthy during these times and while there's so much upheaval and shifting. And so, yeah, I think it's going to be a great conversation. And why don't you introduce yourself if there's anything else I'm sure that I've missed or left off?
Sure. No, you did a great job. So yes, my name's Hannah Smolinski. My business is Clara CFO Group, and we are small business CFOs, and we work virtually. So yes, it's a virtual CFO. Most of the time we work virtually. Every now and then we have local clients, but we basically help business owners that are, they get their financials from their bookkeeper, but then they're like, hey, what do I do with these? Like, I'm good at, therapy. I'm good at other things. I'm not necessarily the one who needs to look at the numbers and decide what to do next. If you need support with those, like any type of decision making, that's really where the CFO role comes in. So we try to help people make the decisions that they need to do so that they can reach their goals. Small business owners, it's so intrinsically tied to our personal finances too. There's lots of like personal goals and business goals that need to be considered. And so we just try to help people make the best decisions they can in their business to help achieve all of that. So yeah, I mean, it's really fun. And I've been very busy recently with all of this wonderful economic / healthcare crisis. So I think we're going to talk about some of that today.
Absolutely. And I know Hannah was saying that she did a lot of extra research last night. And I was like, oh, I'm so impressed. I watched Real Housewives. So.
I'm hoping that I can get into some of that like this weekend. After this week is just nuts.
Yeah, I'm sure. This is kind of your go time because I'm sure. And I think this is why I'm so glad that you're here having this conversation. I think so many of us small business owners are really concerned and we can be really smart business owners and we can make good money, but like you're saying, we don't always know like we're not financial experts. So knowing what we should be doing or kind of what are the first steps, this is where having guidance is really important.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess to start with that, thinking about kind of where everybody is and I'm assuming we're talking to the people whose businesses aren't like super booming because they happen to be in an industry that's really necessary right now. I guess what would be kind of like starting suggestions you would give to the average small business owner who's probably seen a dip in business or a complete lack of business?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I can say, first of all, like everybody's affected, and it might not necessarily be, maybe you're having no problem with revenue. Like maybe you're in a situation that your sales haven't dipped at all. If anything, they've gone up. If that's, not your problem revenue, then it could be like a supply chain issue. It could be an employee issue. Like I had one client whose employees just walked out. They said, nope, we're not going into people's homes. We're not doing it, even though it was a contractor that could have stayed employed. Like they could have kept working. The employees just said, no, we're not going to do it. So sometimes it's the things that you don't even think about that might be affecting the business. So, I mean, I think the first thing that I really just try to like tell anybody that I talk to is like, this is heavy and it's big and it's not normal. And like, I think just calling it out is kind of helpful from the very beginning, just to say like, okay, like this is not what we planned for. It's not what we wanted to happen. Nobody ever, makes their business plans for the year. I guarantee you nobody in January was writing out their budget for the year and going, okay, in March and April, all of my revenue is going to dry up completely. Right?
Yes,
I mean,
nobody did that.
nobody did that. So, I mean, I think just first recognizing that, like, okay, this is a major hardship and it's something that is, um, you know, affecting people in lots of different ways is kind of the first thing. And just like take a deep breath and go, okay. And then I think it gets into like, well, let's assess what our strengths are. Where do we have strengths? And I think for small businesses, one of our biggest strengths is that we're nimble. We can be nimble. We don't have to go through, bureaucracy of getting something approved before we want to do something. If we want to put up a landing page and start selling a new product or something online, we can do it, and we can do it in a day, and I think that that's one of our like big strengths. So I think like really holding on to that piece is what I've been trying to encourage people to do. And then really just trying to think about, okay, what's necessary right now? Like maybe our goals for 2020 might have to shift, but like, what is our goal for right now? And looking at what decisions we need to be making right now to make it through this day, to make it through this week, to figure out exactly, what we need to do in this moment. Because the financial advice I would have given you in January would be slightly different from maybe what I'm giving you today.
Yeah,
If that makes sense.
absolutely. No, and I like that you start the conversation with addressing the mindset, because I do think that's a big piece. I know, because it is very scary, right? Especially if you're, I mean, even if you're not, but if you're the sole breadwinner for your family, and you again you didn't have this expectation that all of a sudden business was going to dramatically change or dry up or whatever it is. So starting with the idea of trying to focus on this, like you're saying, the strengths, and have a little bit more hope about it, I think is really a great strategy. Of Because when we were more optimistic, we have more energy to do things or kind of address things. And I think when we become too overwhelmed, we kind of shut down.
Mm-hmm.
So I love that you start there. So if people then are saying, and I agree with you, I mean, we are as small business owners, like you said, we have this nimbleness, and we have this ability to kind of, yeah, like change it up or be flexible with things,
Mm-hmm.
because there aren't all of these extensive structures in place, right?
Yeah. I mean, like you go, try to, I can't imagine like going to one of these large corporations right now and going, okay, we're going to I mean, I used to work at a large public accounting firm. And I'm just thinking, oh my gosh, they're having to shift like potentially all their audits completely digital, completely online. That would be a nightmare. Like I can't
Yeah.
even imagine like what they're having to go through right now. But the fact that we can just, move our meetings online, or you can do telehealth, like this is, I mean, I know that those types of things are maybe a little bit, you have to get over the hurdle of maybe the customer getting used to it or the client getting used to it, which is definitely a hurdle that we have to, overcome. But it's something that like we can make a shift a lot easier. So I do want to celebrate that. And I also want to say like, I have gone through that moment of the, oh crap, like, and shutting down. I actually shut down about 2 weeks ago. Like I completely shut down and I was like, I'm paralyzed. I can't do anything. Like I just, was that feeling of like, I feel too overwhelmed to even be able to do anything. The only thing I could focus on was my clients for the day. And like, making sure I was fed and my daughter was fed,
Yeah.
And it's like, that was the level that I could operate at. So, kind of, it does take a little bit to kind of get over that hump, but kind of realizing like that this is where we are right now. It
Yeah.
was helpful in getting over that. So,
Yeah, I
you
think
know,
sometimes you do have to give yourself that. I know I went through the same thing, where it wasn't like denial because I was aware, but I just was not motivated. I said, "Oh, I should be doing this. I should be doing all the business finance stuff." And I know I was able to do the personal because it's already so like on point. And so I was like, that was easy, but I was like, that's it. I'm not going to, the business stuff was very overwhelming, you know?
Mhm.
And so this is why I believe in paying experts.
Mhm.
So if, so
Yeah.
if people are finding themselves in a place like, okay, now I'm ready, I need to start addressing this, and I go through, and we're going to assume people have a budget,
Mhm.
because, you know, a lot of business owners I talk to don't.
Might be a generous assumption.
It might be pretty generous, which I always find a little shocking, and then I totally understand it,
Yeah.
absolutely understand it. But let's pretend they have at least listed out all of their expenses.
Okay. Yeah. Or
Still
at least,
generous?
like,
Still generous?
something, or they have, at least a record of what they've done in the past,
Yeah,
which would be your financials if you have a bookkeeper or you do your books yourself.
right.
So,
So they're going through and they're saying, "Okay, now because I'm in this place of uncertainty or like a dip in revenue or
mhm.
whatever, for whatever reason, you know, what what is something, I guess, what's the first strategy to focus on? Because I think we know, like, in these times it would probably be thoughtful to spend less and try to increase revenue, right? So if we're
Right.
focusing on the expense side of things, I guess, do you have any advice there of where to start?
Yeah, I mean, so I've done this. I've done this with clients, and I've done this with previous businesses that I've worked for, where during 2008 everything turned, and it was like, okay, well, or just other business things that happen. Maybe your biggest client goes away, or something that you're not expecting, and you kind of, over time, what happens is, as businesses grow, they start to just accumulate, and time happens, and it's the subscription that gets added on and doesn't get taken off, or it's the, hey, we grew that software because we had extra people on our email list, or something, capacity just starts to expand. But we don't oftentimes take the time to go back and, like, cut down things, or even critically look at things and say, well, is this really necessary? Is this something that we really have to, use? So, like, I like to go through expenses in this time right now, and I like to put in austerity measures, is what I call them, because it's like, okay, we are in a different time than we were even 3 weeks ago. And it's important to think that, like, right now, we need to think about what is critical for the survival of the business right now. And sometimes that is hard to determine. Like, it might be something that's like, well, it's not something that I need right now, but it's something that if I turn off, I can't get it back, or, something like that. So
Yeah.
there are some decisions that need to be made. Like, if you're on a contract with a consultant and you're locked in at a rate, you might not necessarily want to cut off that contract, because if you
Yeah.
want them back, they might be at a totally new rate. So you might not want to do something like that. But in those situations, I would actually call that contractor up and potentially say, hey, this is what we're doing. We can't use your services right now. Can we push it back by a month? Like, just give me a gap or a break or something like that. So this is a time to, like, call up people, say, hey, what can we do? Everybody knows what's happening. Everybody
Yes.
does. And so,
That is
I
the
mean, if you don't,
uniqueness of this particular challenge, right? That we're all in it
yeah,
together.
yeah. I mean, and I saw an email back and forth right now, like yesterday, between my client and his landlord. And the client was saying, hey, this is what's going on. Can we push this back? Like, what can we do here? And so the landlord's kind of like, they're negotiating back and forth with, like, what can they do? So they're talking about maybe, having a higher rent across other months, maybe pushing this month's rent back, but then, spreading it out over a different time, just because they know that, like, right now, cash flow is really low.
Yeah.
And so we're just trying to have those conversations. And then, if you have lenders that you can call up, like, maybe you have an auto loan. Like, I have a couple clients that have, like, vans, like service vans on and they have car loans. And so that means that they have principal and interest. And so maybe they can call up those people and say, hey, can we move this to an interest only payment? Or can we, push this payment back by 2 months without any penalty? Things like that, that could potentially, reserve cash flow. But then, really right now, it's all about just, like, assessing line by line. What is necessary? What can be cut? What is essential and critical to the business that I'm running today?
Right.
Because, I mean, I have clients that have, line items for, like, meals in office and
Yeah.
office kitchen, and nobody's going into the office. So like we can strike that. We don't need that.
Well, I'm
And
so
that's,
glad I stocked up right beforehand.
I know.
It's like,
I
dang
mean,
it.
I know. I'm like, and even like office supplies. I mean, nobody's really buying. I mean, you might be buying like an extra monitor for your home office or something like that, but
Yeah.
you're not necessarily needing to like stock up on office supplies and things like that. Maybe, and then now's the time to maybe consider pushing back some purchases that had maybe been planned. So if you had, planned a rebrand, maybe it's time to like maybe not do that in the moment. Maybe
Right.
it is the time to do it. I don't know. It kind of depends on which way the business is going. But, I mean, there's lots of basically every single line item could be assessed. And I think it's just asking yourself that question: is this necessary right now? Do I need to
Yeah.
spend money on this right now? And not look too far ahead, but just look like right now, is this critical in the
And
moment?
do you think, I mean, I'm guessing like, let's say, a month from now or 6 weeks from now, it's even worse, or your business is taking a dip, that you're probably going to have to revisit again and be a little more cutthroat next time.
Yeah, I mean, I would probably try to do a deep cut if you can from the beginning,
Yeah.
because it will just like help you that much more. But especially when it comes to breaking contracts, that's when I start to go, do I really want to do that right now? Breaking
Yeah.
contracts is kind of a big thing. But if it's just a subscription you can turn off, or like an expense you can hold off on, I would go ahead and just pause on it for now. But on the other side, that is affecting contractors like
Yeah.
myself. I mean, like I've had to advise some people to say like, hey, it actually doesn't make sense for you to pay me right now, which really kind of is horrible. But I mean, that's the role that I'm in as a CFO, is to say like, we need to look at every single expense, and my expense is even on that, it's on the chopping block for
Yeah.
like what we do. So there's a couple clients that we've just said, hey, this is the strategy we've set you up, and like we're going to revisit in May, because like this is realistic and this is what we're doing right now. Although I think like financial strategy is super important, I can also give some strategy, send you on your way, and then touch base with you the next month. Like maybe we don't need to do like the exact same things, during the month, as long as they're executing on what we've talked about.
Right.
So, I mean, contract breaking is one of the big things that I would pause on, but everything else, if you can cut deep, I would do it right away as much
Okay.
as you can.
I think that's helpful. And,
Yeah.
I think even in that process, even if, I mean, obviously we're in this different kind of crisis, if you will, but I think that process is probably really good for people to do. Cause like we're saying, I know, cause I talk to a lot of business owners, most of them do not have budgets or even everything written down. And so, um, I think it is an important kind of activity to go through and kind of be questioning that stuff anyway, but
Mhm.
really necessary to stop the bleed, if you will.
Yeah. I mean, even if you don't have books, like if you don't have a bookkeeper and you haven't done that yet, go through your credit card statement and go through your bank statement,
Right.
and just like highlight anything you don't know what it is and investigate and say, what? Whoa. What was that charge? What was that charge? And then you'll probably find some things that you could pretty quickly just turn off.
Yeah. I know I've done that before. Like, I remember doing it a couple years ago. And then being ADHD, I've lacked the follow through to actually cancel them. But I identified like $360 a month. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh my God, that's like so much money.
Yeah.
And then, continue to pay for a while. But
Yeah.
but I actually heard this strategy from Mike Michalowicz. I'm not sure what you think of it, but I understood it from a psychological standpoint of money can be very overwhelming to people anyway. This is why people like you are very helpful. But he said if you're in a place where you don't have that list, you don't have that budget, and you're so overwhelmed, he said call all your credit cards and debit cards and have them canceled and get a new number, because then that way all of the people on these subscriptions will contact you, and then you can make the decision whether or not, he's saying not pay somebody. But
Yeah.
like I have things like that where I
Oh,
actually
totally.
had to I accidentally cut up the wrong debit card. So instead of the new one, I just cut up the old one, or I cut up the new one instead of the old one. but it was interesting because I was like, oh, I kind of like that. If you're in a place that's really overwhelmed, it might
Mhm.
be easier to do that. And although that is overwhelming to get all those emails from people, but
Mhm.
but then you can say like, hey, yeah, actually, I don't use this, membership thing anymore. So I just will say, no, I'm sorry, I want to cancel. And
Yeah.
again, it's not about not paying people or not finishing contracts, but it is a kind of a good way. I don't know what you think about that one, but
I mean, I can see why that would be a good way. For me personally, that would drive me crazy
yeah, and this
because
is
I
why
hate
I
having to like
waited.
re-sign up for things and like go and like type in my number again.
I know. I
Um,
understood it. I do get like when I
totally,
see
yeah.
people who are overwhelmed and
Mhm,
when they're in that be it financial or just overwhelmed with their lives, and
mhm.
especially because there's a lot of chaos going on. Um, I put off. I lost a credit card like in November, and I was like, I know it's in the house somewhere. No one's been using it. And then I was like, "Ugh, okay, fine. I just have to cancel it." Because I was like, as soon as I do, I had it saved everywhere.
I know.
As soon as I
Yeah.
do, then I have to deal with all those emails.
I have been there. I just recently had that happen.
Yeah, it's just like whatever. But so
Yeah.
that's helpful. So going
Mhm.
through and trying to be a little more, I don't remember if I said the word cutthroat, but a little more cutthroat in how you're approaching it the first time, ideally.
Yeah, and there's I I don't know if you do this, but I do this. Um, I've had things, even like tools, maybe even like this. I don't know if this is a paid tool that we're using to stream live, but I had a tool like this that I was, paying for because I was doing occasional Facebook lives and
Right.
like streaming. And then for like 6 months, I didn't do any Facebook lives, but I was paying $20 a month for it. And I
Yeah.
was like, I had signed up for it and I did it for a while. And then I was like, oh, yeah, I might do it again sometime. But then that would be a thing that I would cut because it's like, I'm not doing that right now. So if I'm not
Yes.
doing that right now, and I know that at any point in time I can go and sign back up for that service, it's not a big deal. Or I can move to like the free version, like downgrade. There's lots of
Mhm.
options to downgrade right now. I mean, just do it. It's going to take you 5 minutes and it's going to save you a little bit of money. And think of that money as like opportunity cost for something else. So that $20 or that $360 that you saved could have been spent on something else, like a VA to help you with something that was really important, or
Mhm.
your bookkeeper or whoever it might be. Like those things, are freeing up cash for something else that could be more helpful to you right now.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I look at it. But
Yeah, and it's like you're saying, it's kinda like that just-in-time learning or just-in-time, utilization of something. So it's like if you're not in that space, I know when I signed up for this, I meant to hit the monthly thing, and instead I prepaid the year. And so I was like, "Oh, I'm committed to doing
yeah.
video now because I just prepaid the year, dang it." But that is why,
But
yeah,
make
sometimes
sure they're going to charge your credit card in a year. So make sure you watch that.
I know. I had started a list. I need to keep the list in one spot though. Like the list
Mhm.
of on May of 2021, cancel blah 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 or whatever.
Mhm.
But yes, I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, they don't always send you notifications, which I think
No,
is a
they
little
don't.
shady. But
No, they
anyway,
don't.
I did have a client that recently, just naturally, she had an employee, and so she was using Gusto as her payroll service, and then
Mhm.
the employee decided to take a full-time job, so she was off payroll, and so then that was the only employee that was using the payroll service, and so I was like, well, that's about like $30 a month, $35 a month for Gusto. So I went onto their site to see like, hey, can we get this pushed back or something? And they had like they had a button that you could just defer if
Oh,
you
that's
didn't
so
have any
great.
payroll. So, I mean, there are some things, and then there's a lot of software companies right now that are offering some free or extended trials. So potentially, even if you're looking to, maybe the service you're working with not right now is not working, like maybe switching might be a good time to switch if you can get like a 3 month, free of something else,
Absolutely.
might be a
As
good
long
time.
as you, like you said, write it down, like have a page or like a notebook so that you can remind yourself, because I can't tell you how many things where like I just paid $50 because I needed to edit a PDF and it had a
Mhm.
1 week free trial and I forgot to cancel. So I'm like, come
Yeah.
on. Um, but yeah, I think that's a good idea. And I see, I love Gusto. Is it Gusto or
Gusto.
Gusto?
Gusto.
It's
I
one of
call
those
it
things.
gusto.
I know when I remember it wrong, then I remember it wrong forever. They're so great, and I love when there's companies out there like that that are I use them as well for my payroll.
Mhm.
And when you have companies that are they make it easy, and then there are
Yeah.
other companies where I've had just horror experiences trying to cancel, and they continue to charge me years after I canceled, and like that,
Yeah.
fight. So it's like, also, let's remember this when we're all through this, to support those companies who really make it easy and work with us,
Yeah.
as opposed to the ones who are really difficult.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah. No, I mean, I'm not going to name names, but
I feel like naming a name, I'm telling
okay.
you.
Well, I've had some pretty bad experiences with paychecks, like moving people from paychecks, and they've been one of those people that have been like a little bit. But I've already been moving most clients over to Gusto anyway because it's just way
Yeah.
better.
It is. It's so good. I really, really like it. Yeah, mine was a social media scheduler. I just can't remember. And they still pretend that I'm a member, and they still send
Yeah.
me emails, and I'm like,
You're like,
quit
no,
charging me 150 a year. I hate you people.
no, yeah, yeah,
But
those
yeah,
are so
so those are
frustrating.
good. So so then, okay, so going through, so people are saying, okay, now I'm looking at, I'm going to go through and be judicious with my expenses, and really try to cut out anything that I'm not utilizing right now, or
Mhm,
that I no longer use, or doesn't make sense, or it's just kind of like that luxury thing. Like,
mhm,
I know some, friends who have like really big practices, and they would spend like 1,500, because they had multiple locations, $1,500 a month on like snacks and drinks for their clients and their staff.
mhm,
And they said, well, obviously nobody's going to the office, so that was an easy expense, right?
mhm,
So there's that side of it, of like going through and just being thoughtful about what don't we need right now.
mhm,
But then I think the part that I think that is hard for a lot of people, and I know, for me as well, is I know you've talked about kind of like, how do we assess our projections? And that
mhm,
feels really overwhelming, in the sense of like, how could I even possibly know? Because we're not, like you're saying, it's not normal business.
mhm.
So I don't know if that's even something you can answer, just kind of giving us like an overview. But
Yeah.
like, how do I try to figure out like what's likely in this scenario where we have no clue?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I mean, it kind of goes back to cutting expenses too. I mean, what if you don't have to cut expenses? I mean, is your business okay? Like for the next couple months, you don't even really have to cut anything? I mean, do you even know that? Like those are the kind of questions that we're trying to figure out. So, what I like to do with people, and it seems to be one of the most helpful things, is to try to put together a cash flow forecast. And it's all it is. It's really just trying to say, okay, how much cash do I have right now? And then what do I know is coming in, which might be zero. We might say, hey, it's zero. Like we know that no money is coming in this next month. And then what do I know is going out? And then where's my comfort level with that? Because different people have different comfort levels too. So, maybe you have $50,000 in the bank, and that would feel to some people like they have hit the jackpot, and that if they had $50,000 in the bank, they could conquer the world. And then for some people I've worked with, like they freak out if there's only $50,000 in the bank. And it's not okay, So it's kind of also trying to feel like where are you comfortable with? So with a cash flow forecast, you can say, okay, I'm starting with this amount of money. I know I'm going to get in this. I know this stuff is coming out. What's my net change during the month? So maybe I lose $10,000 in a month, but like that still feels comfortable for me. So what if the same thing happened next month? Okay, what would that look like? Okay, what if things started to pick up in May? What, like maybe it was half of what I did in February, or maybe it was like, a quarter of what I did in February. But you can start to kind of actually put like real numbers into a spreadsheet, which I mean, I'm a numbers person and I do love my spreadsheets. um, but it's like once you just put like real numbers into it and you kind of put in what you actually know, then you can start to say, okay, what am I comfortable with and what am I not okay with? And then that can kind of help you to go back and say, okay, I do need to cut deeper. Or actually, I don't have to cut anything because I'm going to be just fine. My savings are enough to get me through this. And so I've had those conversations with clients that are like, hey, it's okay if I don't get any revenue for the next 2 months because I'm okay. And
Right.
it's like, oh, well, that's refreshing that you're okay with that. There's still some options if you did want to try to get some revenue in the door, like we can still talk about that. But
Mhm.
some people are just like, hey, I'm going to hunker down, and I'm just not going to worry. And it's like, okay. But basically, because we knew that the cash she had and the money going out, it was going to be okay. And she made some
Right.
cuts, like called up the landlord and did a couple things, moved to a smaller office space. She had like rented one of those like office, kind of co-working type spaces,
Okay. Yeah.
rented a smaller space, save some money that way.
Yeah.
So I think it's really about like kind of figuring out what you're comfortable with, and then what you have, and then what you do know. And then you
Yes.
can try to fill that last variable of what you don't know.
Right.
Which the last variable is, in a lot of our cases, is our revenue, because we just don't know. We don't know when that's going to pick back up again. And, maybe it's fine right now, but maybe you're thinking, well, April might be bad, or maybe May might be bad. But
Yeah.
you can start to kind of plan like worst case scenario in those situations. Like what would it look like worst case scenario? What would it look like on a normal basis? And then what would it look like if I, picked back up and did just fine? you know
I like that. And I think, hopefully it's comforting to for others to hear that, like, there isn't, I think sometimes you think, oh, these magic money people like know exactly what it's going to be. And it's like, well, obviously there's no way to know. And
Mm-mm.
so, but like you said, using all the rest of the data that you do have to help kind of inform that decision. And, as overwhelming as like spreadsheets are to some people and numbers, I know that when you do have that kind of concrete data, it really is on a psychological level very comforting, because
Mhm.
it may tell you bad news, but at least you know. And then
Mhm.
you have your options, right? You have your choices about what can I
Mhm.
do? Do I cut? Do I try, do I pivot? Do I try to increase profits? So
Mhm.
I think that's really helpful for people to hear. And it is just taking the time. And my guess is, because I think I've talked to enough money people now that uh, like if you do those numbers on a weekly basis, you're going to start to see a trend. So like you're
Mhm.
saying, if you see like, oh, we just dipped down 20%, or, oh, now we're back up 5%, or, so that because otherwise if you're like, I have no idea, it's just kind of scary.
Yeah. Well, if you look at historical data, it will inform the future. Um, and you can use it, but use it with like your knowledge as the business owner of what is going on in the business right now. Because like we can't look at March of 2019 and say, okay, copy paste. Revenue
Yeah.
is going to be the same.
Yeah.
Or, April of 2019. Like we can't do that. Like it's just not going to work for us this year, probably. Most people are going to be probably in like the decline. Some people will be the same, and then some people will be better than last year, but only the business owner and the people who are closest to operations will understand, okay, what do you think is going to happen? I'm sure you and I have a real good sense of what our businesses are feeling like in this next month. Is it feeling like it's going to be slower? Is it feeling like it's going to be better? Is it feeling like in my case, I'm working a lot more, but not necessarily getting a lot more revenue?
Yes.
you know, it's like there's a lot to do, but not necessarily like it's not because it's like a bunch of new clients. But I have a sense for what it's going to look like in the short term. And then, I can project out what I think is going to happen in May. My situation, I'm in consulting, so I have contracts with people. So I know I have a list of clients, and I know what technically I should be paid each month. It makes it a little bit easier for me to predict revenue. For you, like if you're like seeing clients one-on-one, or I'm not exactly sure like how you're doing it right now, but it might be a little bit harder to predict in that situation. Or like an e-commerce store, you don't have any control of how much traffic is coming in, but what you do have is you do have data. You do kind of have, hey, I saw that like maybe March dipped 10%, or maybe March dipped 50%. If you have that type of data, you can start to project out, okay, well, clearly my customers are affected. What can I do to either pivot to what they need Or what can I do to start, generating? Maybe it's just, I need to send more emails right now. Maybe that's what it is. Because every time you send an email, you get a certain amount of money back. I don't know
Right.
exactly. But you as a business owner will know what are those triggers that are either indicating, revenue is going down, or what are those things that that you can do to try to stimulate interest again. So the revenue is definitely the hardest part to predict by far, like for anybody. And
Right.
because even if you have a contract, that doesn't mean you're going to get paid at the right time. Like you might
Absolutely.
invoice somebody, but it doesn't mean your money's coming in.
Yeah. And if even like you're saying, even if you have a contract, if people all of a sudden have zero revenue,
Mhm.
they might have to, break a contract or, try to negotiate or something. So yeah, it's just one of those things where it is unprecedented times because you
Mm.
might have had that. You always probably have those one-offs, right? But then now it's like on a bigger level. And
Mhm.
so that's why I think actually going through the numbers is really helpful
Yeah.
for sure.
And I think definitely having that kind of worst case scenario, you have it there. You know what it could be. Just kind of knowing what it is. Then also, if you know what it like how bad it could be and then doesn't end up being that bad, that like kind of makes you feel like, oh, well, I'm doing pretty good.
Exactly.
Not necessarily comparing it to what you thought you were going to do in January, for the year. Like I'm not even really looking. I mean, I still have annual revenue goals, but I'm tapering all of those expectations right now because I'm trying to get through March and April. And well, I guess now we're through March, but like I'm trying to get through April and May, knowing that it's still going to be all up in the air and we're not really sure like, where it's going to go. But yeah, I think tapering expectations is helpful right now. So you're
Yeah.
not also beating yourself up, like trying to be full-time working person and maybe full-time homeschooler and also trying to reach revenue goals that are not really realistic in the moment.
Yeah, because like you pointed out, I think it can be very demotivating because you're already feeling extra stress and extra, burden and things you're having to take care of. Because for a lot of people too, I'm even thinking about, for those of us who had people that were coming into our homes to help us alleviate some of our demands on ourselves, it's like now that's gone too. So then you
Mhm.
have to, you know, you no longer have that help, even if
Mhm.
it's, uh, yeah, so there's lots of extra pressure on you.
Yeah.
Um, and you said something and I wanted to come back to it. So smart, but my brain.
Well, I'll bring up another topic if you're open to
Yes,
it.
absolutely.
I was thinking about that kind of worst case scenario situation and specifically using a cash flow forecast. Right now, there are loans available, and the government has opened up SBA lending for economic injury disaster loans, and then they're also offering another program called the Paycheck Protection Program. And those two things specifically, I think are really important to use something like a cash flow so that you can, even if you are, have any say in how much you think you need to get through a certain period of time, those can be really helpful. Because if you say, hey, what does it look like if I completely have no cash flow coming in for 2 months? Like maybe I need a loan of, you might not know how much to ask for from
Right.
like a injury loan. So having those numbers, because you might be like, oh, actually, if I just had $20,000, this would be all okay. Or maybe it's $200,000. But if you don't have any sort of reasonableness on how much you really need, then you can kind of that can just be confusing. So I think the cash flow can just help bring a lot of clarity to that. And then you can actually plug it in too. Like, okay, well, I know I've applied for this loan and I'm supposed to be receiving it 3 weeks after I applied. So you can put it in to your cash flow in the right time so you can see like what that will look like and if you have any, dangerous dips in your cash flow in the short term. So you can, figure out if you need to move some money around or you need to like, ask somebody for, a personal loan or something like that if you really got into a dire situation, or if you needed to like take some money from personal savings and put it back into the business. that type of stuff could all go into a cash flow, which could be really helpful.
Right. No, yeah, and again, I think having those numbers is really important because I do feel money is such an emotional thing for people that
Mhm.
sometimes they can come up if they don't have the data, they're just again going to kind of come up with what feels okay, what feels like it's too much or enough, and it's not based on the actual need.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, I think that's just an important place to start for sure.
Yeah.
So, can you say maybe a little bit about? I mean, you could do like a brief overview. I know there's a lot of places where people can get extensive information, but just
Mhm.
for the SBA lending
Mhm.
thing, for if people are wondering, like, is that something that's even for me? Do I qualify, or what does that look like?
Yeah, and then I'll give a big caveat that, like, double check me.
Yes.
Because I've been doing a lot of research, but, I don't wanna misspeak or anything like that. So there's 2 main programs people are talking about right now. So they're both essentially SBA programs. They are SBA programs, or they're backed by the government. There's 2 different ways to apply. So there's 2. I'm gonna talk about them separately. So the first one is the economic injury disaster loans. And so those are the kind of loans that, like, when, Katrina happened, or, some of these hurricanes and like whole towns were taken out, like those get kicked in. Uh-oh. I'm going to mute. Hold on.
No, no worries. Your dog is like, I do not like that. I do not like hurricanes, and
He really doesn't like our FedEx guy.
I know, I was thinking, I was like, Clearly you're getting a delivery." We totally understand. I mean, this is working from home. This is the new I think people have to I'm pretty sure people are pretty understanding of this, so
It's I was like, I don't even know. I figured this would probably happen during the time. And I'm like, if I was a really good dog owner, I would have trained this out of him by now, but
I don't know any dogs that don't bark at the delivery guy. At least you don't need a doorbell. I mean, I think that's the upside of it.
okay, I'm gonna try. He's yeah, when it pulls away, it's gonna be worse. I might have to go take care of him.
Okay. No, I could share a little anecdote about my, disaster planning. So while, Hannah's on mute because her dogs are in full terror mode, I guess I'm gonna go back to because I am not the expert on the, small business lending, but, to talk to you, if you're the person who doesn't have a bookkeeper yet, and even if you have a bookkeeper, if you don't have a budget, I'm just going to throw out some ideas. The easiest way to do it would be just to write a list in a notebook. That's like the old school, easiest way. I personally use Excel. I love it. I love the way it works like my brain, so I love it. And then there's a lot of great programs like Mint or well, I use QuickBooks for my business expenses, but again, I send those off to a bookkeeper, and then they do numbers, and I think, oh, interesting. I don't know what to do with that. So that's why I still keep a budget for myself and my business, which ironically, I actually did. I I did this years ago where I call it the tab in Excel is SHTF. So it's when shit hits the fan. And I have one for my personal expenses and one for my business. And it was
Nice.
like literally if everything dries up, like what are my minimum operating expenses and how can
Yeah.
I get through this? And I know that you're going to be talking more now that your dogs are done, but talking about this, and
Thanks
I
for
think
filling.
what I think about is like, okay, at what point, like I had some conversations with people where they were like, and I think their business is probably doing, better than even than mine. I think they have a really say I have a good business, but they have a great business, and but that tolerance for risk was
Mhm.
really low. And so they were like, okay, if this happens for 2 months, I'm just going to file bankruptcy. And I was like, wow, like I think I think it'll recover, given
Mhm.
their fields. But it's interesting. And so I think, like, because again, it's not about just the numbers, it's about how does that impact us emotionally, or and how does it impact our security, our sense of security? And so
Mhm.
figuring that out. So I was just trying to fill the time while you were dealing with the dogs,
Dealing
but
with my
yeah.
my furry coworker.
But I and as I know you're going to continue on and tell us about the small business stuff, but I think that's a question too of like, how long do I continue to fund my business or take out loans or do this thing in the long term, or when do I call it a day? And you don't necessarily have to answer that, but I think it's something that people are kind of questioning for themselves, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a legitimate question to ask. I think we should always ask that, really. I mean,
Mm.
I appreciate when people recognize that like a business is not long-term viable early enough. That they don't get into a situation where they're trying to bail it out, bail it out, bail it out, and with like more loans, because maybe you just fundamentally from a core either have something that people don't really want to buy, or a service that is not really working for people, or maybe you have a bad location, or maybe you have something that's like you've set up from the beginning in like kind of a bad place. And I believe everything's changeable, but you might eventually go, hey, this is not working, I'm just going to scrap it and maybe I'm going to start something new. I mean, most entrepreneurs have more than one business that they've started. It's not the end of the world to close something down. And I think that's kind of one of the things that we hold on to for pride, or we hold on to for like other reasons of, I've got to make this thing work, I've got to make my idea work. And so we'll get loans and try to make it work. So I only try to encourage people to even like look into a loan or something. I usually don't, almost always. Like I'm like, hey, it might not make sense. Now, sometimes I'll do it if you need to refinance and like you have big credit card debt and you need to just like get it on like a lower fixed amount. But sometimes I'm like, hey, there's a fundamental problem if you're having to always accumulate more and more debt. I think personally, I feel like that there's a problem with the business model if you're always needing to borrow more money than you're making, especially if you're using that borrowed money for things like payroll. If you're using it to operate your business and you're not investing in your business, that's where it triggers to me to go, something's not right here. And so I think it's good to make those determinations early if you can. And right now might be a situation where people go, you know what? It wasn't feeling right. And it wasn't really working. And do I really want to go $50,000 into debt to bail it out? Or should I just say, hey, let's call it good. Maybe we'll still like get some money and then start something different, maybe that's an option for people. And I think it's good to keep all the options on the table right now.
And I like that you say that, because I think too that, especially as small business owners, people will say like, this is my baby. We get so attached to our businesses, and we also like, we let it reflect who we are. Like the idea of like, I don't want to be a bad business person. Like I want to be successful. And I think about companies like, I'm going to use Hollywood Video, which wasn't as popular as Blockbuster, but at least Blockbuster tried to pivot at the end, right? And then
Yeah.
they still didn't manage to outbeat Netflix, but at the same time, that idea of that was a super successful business, huge franchise, like all over. And then eventually the market shifted, and it's not like, oh, that was a bad business owner. I mean, yes, you could always, iterate, innovate, pivot, whatever. But at the same time, there's like an understanding of, okay, maybe this is no longer the time for this thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I like that you're saying to question that, or at least to be thoughtful. Cause that's, I guess, my concern too is, hearing stories from people, I guess being in Silicon Valley, hearing stories from people who really like take out second mortgages and really put in all of this stuff into a company that ended up not being viable, not because it wasn't a great product or they weren't brilliant people or whatever. It just, for whatever reason didn't catch on then. And so I think, like you're saying, this might be an opportunity to take a look at, is this something you want to keep doing?
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, everybody's risk tolerance is different, like you mentioned. And, that's my opinion on like, I think it's not worth going, crazy in debt to do some of these things. But some people do feel like it's worth it if they have an idea that they want to run with. And, I mean, ultimately it's everybody's personal decision. I mean, that's the wonderful thing about owning your own small business. You can do whatever the heck you want.
And everyone thinks they're gonna be that one movie, that inspirational movie where the person did that, and then ultimately now they're just, like, world famous. Of course, I think of none of those companies right now, I won't remember any of them, but
Yeah, yeah.
but it's one of those things where it's like, okay, and that could be true, like you're saying, if you have the passion and drive, then do that, but
Yeah.
that's, yeah, it's something to think about. So
Mhm.
you were talking about the, disaster
Let's talk about those for a little
something.
bit. And hopefully I don't have another disaster happen.
Just don't mention
My bark.
hurricanes, your dog does not like that.
I know, it's like, this is prime delivery time. I should have thought about that. So the two loans, or the two loan programs that are available right now specifically for the COVID disaster. So it's the economic injury disaster loans and then the payroll protection program, PPP. So these programs, they're both ultimately administered through the SBA. The payroll protection program, what that does is it's trying to keep people off of unemployment, essentially. It's trying to keep people employed and working in a business so that they're not going out and using the unemployment system, because our state unemployment systems are completely overrun at the moment. Like, we've had unemployment like we've never seen before, really.
Yeah.
And it's just going to keep growing as this crisis continues. So this payroll protection program has gives the business owner the opportunity to apply for up to 2.5 times their average payroll from the last year. So you would basically take like your average payroll, maybe it's like $20,000 a month, and you would calculate that based on your payroll reports. And then you would take, 2 months of that plus another 25%. So it's 2.5 times. So that'd be what, like $50,000. If your average payroll is 20,000, then you could potentially get 50,000 in a loan. And that money is specifically used, you're supposed to specifically use it to continue paying your employees. And if you do, you get almost all of it forgiven.
Oh, wow.
Forgiven. Like,
Wow.
this is like where I'm like, okay, this is too good to be true. I don't
Yes.
even know, like,
My mind is like, "What?"
blowing up. So there's some stipulations to it, of course, but like, it's a pretty amazing program. Now, the biggest thing about it is, so it came with like almost $350 billion of funding through the CARES Act that was just passed last Friday, I think, on the 27th. And the thing about this is that once the money's gone, it's gone. So anybody who wants to apply for it needs to get on it, is basically what we're saying. And you do have to have payroll. Like, you can't just be, well, actually, you do have to have payroll, and then the companies that have payroll are allowed to apply for it first. A week later, independent contractors and sole proprietorships are allowed to apply. So that's a big deal, because there's never been, usually sole proprietors and independent contractors usually can't get unemployment. And so this is kind of a big deal that they could potentially apply for this, like, employment type.
Oh, I see. You're saying sole proprietors who could pay themselves then.
Yeah. So like, if you were
I know
just
sole
running,
proprietors that have employees.
yeah, there are sole proprietors who have paychecks, but then, like, if it was just them, like, and they were, just paying themselves through the profits of their business, they could potentially apply, but not until a week after it opens up for employees.
Okay, that makes sense.
With like employees. So I actually was on a phone call this morning with my bank, because I had sent an email and it wasn't getting responded to. So I called and I said, hey, are you guys doing these loans? Because the PPP program, you have to apply through a bank. The other program, you can apply directly on the SBA site. Okay. So it's kind of two separate things. But the PPP program, you have to go through a bank that does SBA loans. And so my local bank here that I have my checking account with does do them. So I called up the business manager over there, and she told me that they have a special website just for their customers that you can register if you want to get one of these, and it basically puts you in line. And so this is like my big message right now that I'm telling my clients, and then anybody else who will listen, is that if you want one of these loans, you need to contact a bank ASAP and see if you need to get in line somewhere, because this is such a good program, or apparently such a good program, that like the money will run out of this program and it will get used. So it's definitely something that we want to try to get into.
Absolutely. And do you have to go to your own bank that you use? Is that like the best option, or?
Probably if you already have a banking relationship. Like when I filled out this application for one of my clients, it said, "Are you a client of the bank? Yes or no?"
Okay.
And so I could have clicked no, but I don't know if that would put me into like a separate queue.
I know,
Or,
that's why I asked that, 'cause for people who are, um, like, it might be best just to go with the bank that you're already using then.
Yes. Yeah. Especially if you have a relationship with a banking manager, that when your email pops up or your phone call, comes up, like they know to answer it because they know you. That's who I would go to first.
Our bankers.
Yeah, I know. Especially if you go to like a really big bank, like a Chase or something like that.
Yeah.
I would, and then I had been told too by this bank, she was saying she thinks they're still waiting for guidelines to come down. So they don't even open up applications until Friday.
Right.
So we can register to kind of like get in queue, but like we can't submit a application until Friday. But she was saying that she thinks that the banks are getting different allotments and that her bank still had funds to allot. So to me, that's going, oh, well, maybe if you don't get into one bank, I wonder if like it makes sense to try another one. So that's something to think about too. I don't think you can apply two simultaneously.
Right.
You'd probably have to get rejected from one before you could apply to another one. But I wouldn't say just because you get rejected by one means, that, I mean, you might be able to ask them if the funding is just gone. Is it gone for that bank, or is it gone?
Right. No, that's good. And I think, this is a time for people to contact their bank managers, because I know
Yes.
nobody's doing that. Just
I
telling
know,
you.
I know. I'm getting text messages from like Chase saying, use our online services.
Oh, I'm sure.
And I would say on that one, there is some parts. So if you do have to let people go and you don't retain your employees, then it turns into a loan, a regular loan. And actually the term for the loan is pretty short. So it's only 2 years for repayment on that. So, which is pretty short for a business loan. Normally like a short period would be 5 years. So if you are going to take that plan, make sure you comply with keeping your employees as you're supposed to. Don't try to pull any strings and do something weird and think you can get around it and fire everybody and just keep the money for yourself.
It'd be really stupid. I was like, but it seems smart that especially if it's forgiven, like what a no-brainer to be able to still support your team if you happen to have this big cut, but
Yeah.
then still have that cushion and that, of time, of money, however long that will buy you, right? I think that's fantastic.
Yeah.
It was interesting because, like I said, I don't know if this is the researcher in me. I may not like to call people, but I like to research. But there was another, business person I was listening to, and he was talking about now, and this depends on your industry. But he was saying he really didn't recommend, and I know everybody has their own thoughts, but he didn't recommend taking out loans to pay for payroll, because he said your employee, you take out this loan for payroll, and then all of a sudden your employees leave you 2 months later anyway. And then you're stuck with this huge bill. But he
Yeah.
said taking out loans to pay for like operating expenses or things like, your rent or your mortgage or whatever it is that you have to pay anyway, right? But that's where this seems like because I think a lot of people are advocating like being also thoughtful, like do you have to cut back people's hours or cut back their
Mhm.
wages or lay people off or put them on furlough or whatever it's called.
Mhm.
But this seems like an opportunity to be able to still support your team and make sure that your employees are doing well, and then not have to take such a huge risk if they decide to leave you. Right.
Right. I mean, because even if you were to, potentially lay them off, they go out and they get unemployment and you're like, oh, I can just hire them back. Like, no, they're not going to find another job. Like, what if those employees are, a huge part of of your business and how you show up in your community.
Yeah.
And you love those people and you want them to be, I mean, if they feel like your family and they're like, part of your team, and, you don't even want to have that negative experience of being laid off, like that can be, that can be a little bit traumatic for anybody. But then do you want to go back to a company that just laid you off? And like, what if they just do it again? So like, if you can retain those employees and keep them on payroll and keep them with you, it's going to be a more positive experience for everybody. Even if you can't, have them doing the same service, like maybe you do give them a week of PTO because you just got the money from the government to basically give them some paid time off. I mean, why not? I think that makes sense. Or maybe you have them do some other things for your business, like maybe help with social media or write some blog posts or do some things that could be helpful in moving your business forward in other ways that maybe they wouldn't normally have time to do because they're always, client facing or client serving or customer facing, So I think it's a really good program. I'm really impressed with it. I'm curious to see how available it's really going to be at the, to people. Like, are people really going to have access to it? I don't know how fast this money's going to go. But it's, I calculated that like every small business, there's like an average of 30 million businesses in, the US right now. And then if every single one of them took some of this, it would give each person about $12,000, each business about $12,000. So that doesn't help for the businesses that are taking the max of 10 million.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
They would be getting a lot more than some of us, but, why not put your, if you have payroll, try to get some of this. And there are some people who really aren't affected. Okay, then maybe you don't need this right now and maybe leave it for people who do really need it. But I have clients who may not need it right now, but we're looking at long-term projections. And like, we know we have to make hiring decisions, 3 to 4 months in advance, like firing decisions. If we don't see contracts coming in, it's multiple months before those things actually affect our cash flow. So we have to make really early decisions. So this could potentially be saving people's jobs right now that we would otherwise might have to let go if, so it's a timely thing. And I want people to be able to take advantage of it if they can.
I love that. And yes, and thank you for the heads up. And I will share it with all the small business owners I know too, because I think it is important. And, like you're saying, I think sometimes as a small business owner, everything feels so overwhelming. And I had a conversation earlier today with somebody who said, well, technically I'm still working. And I said, yeah, but didn't like half your clients not transition to online therapy, right? And so it's like we've had these cuts and so it's like we're almost in this thing is like unless I'm completely broke and destitute, then I don't qualify. And I think, like you're saying, is just put it out there and see what happens and kind of, be thoughtful. And like, if you're one of those businesses that's booming, yes, don't be that guy. Don't do that. But if you're, like a lot of people that I know who, the future is uncertain, I think that's helpful. Well, if anybody who's on the live right now has any questions for Hannah before we let her go, this is your chance to talk to this financial guru. And I know you sent me a YouTube link.
Oh yeah. I sent you a YouTube. I think hopefully you're still there. Uh-oh. I'm on. Did we lose Amber? That'll be funny if I wrap up her live. Let's see here. Let's see where Amber is. All right. Well, I think it's just me wrapping up Amber's live. If anybody does have any questions, I can totally answer them, and then she'll probably pop back on. I didn't even think that would be possible for her to hop off. Let's see here. So I'm looking at the live. I don't see any questions, and it looks like there's not a whole lot of people on live right at this moment. So maybe I'll just wrap up and say we will put a Amber's trying to get back on. we will put a link in this comment and then maybe even in the YouTube channel to the video that gives you the cash flow forecasting resource that I have. I actually give you a spreadsheet and then I have a 30-minute video walking you through how to use it. So that can be super helpful. Definitely make sure to find, watch the rest of Amber's series because these have been really great and helpful as we're at home. Just doing the best that we can right now. So keep that up. And then if you want to reach out to me, feel free to. My website is claracfo.com, CLARACFO.com. And then also feel free to just like directly message me if you're on Facebook and you want to find me. And then let's see. I'm going to just think if there's any other resources. If we have any other resources specifically about the loans, we'll try to tag them here too, because those are really timely and you need to know about those and take action right now. So I think I'm going to just message Amber, see if I should wrap up here. The last thing I would say is make sure you talk to your financial professional about any concerns you're having and see if they can be helpful, especially if you are trying to consider one of these loans. Get some advice. Feel free to talk to me or feel free to talk to your bookkeeper. I know they can be really helpful because they see like the detail of everything that's happening, or talk to your CPA, somebody who can give you some advice on which of these programs to apply for, or both, or one over the other. I just want you to have the support you need right now. And the government has tried to make these programs something that can be helpful to you. And they've tried to design it so that it's, they've tried to design it so it could be as helpful as possible. So I am going to wrap up then. It looks like, the system just wanted me to wrap up this live today. So thank you all so much for joining us. And then you'll be able to find the replay on YouTube. So find us there, My Biz Bestie channel. And then if you want to check out my channel too, it's Clara CFO Group on YouTube, and find us there. So stay safe and stay sane, everybody. All right. Bye.